right, folks, once again, you are back ostensibly live with the DLR cast, the podcast, the only podcast by and for fans of the mighty Diamond One, Diamond David Lee Roth. As always, I'm Steve, along here with my good friend, the debonair, the Dynamite Kid himself, host of the Paltrocast and co-host of the DLR cast right here. No more introductions necessary. Darren Paltrowitz. Darren, great to see you. Great to hear you again, my friend.
Likewise, I promise 80% less coughing on this episode. Now the coughing is down to like 3 spats a day. But
all right, well, as long as the coughing is more due to rough mornings, cigarette haze, and drinking, and not anything related to a global pandemic, we'll take it. So
thank you. Well, I thought that I was going to have the best exclusive of all time on this podcast. And it was a bust.
Having said that, though, hold on. We have got a great Roth exclusive as far as this interview. But let's start with the bust scoop exclusive that you had. And we'll get into our interview in a bit. But let's preface that by saying you did deliver with a great scoop and a terrific exclusive here. So, but let's hit what didn't happen first.
Okay. So there were some comments being responded to on the Facebook posts of David Lee Roth. And it was responding to some of the people. And it was all lowercase. You were like, okay, I get it. Is he managing his social media? So he was responding this account to some people. And it was like, hey, Dave, hope you're fine. Yeah, I'm fine, man. Like those kinds of responses. Like, oh, my God, he's alive. He's on social media. And this was tipped off to me by a prior guest of ours who got responded to. And then I went, something doesn't smell right here. And I looked, it was a fake account. It was a David Lee Roth official responding on these texts. Now, I was excited and giddy for hours because I thought, wait, he knows about our podcast.
Okay, wait a minute. Which Facebook page was this person posting at?
The official David Lee Roth blue checkmark account.
Okay, where he posts the artwork.
Yes, was getting responses on it from David Lee Roth official. So if you're, a person with common sense, you'd go, oh, wow, okay, response, matching profile photo. And then you click on it and you see 12 followers and you go, oh. Now, I thought, just like everybody, this was Dave or somebody on Dave's team's responding until I saw one post. Somebody said something like, Dave, you got to make up these Vegas shows. And the spoof account writes back, okay, I will. And you go, oh, okay, something's up here. He wouldn't just do that. So I did what I thought was the right thing. And I reported it as a spoof account to be deleted because that is evil. Like that person was saying to some people, hey, DM me. Like, hey, direct message me. Somebody thought the brilliant idea of creating a mirror David Lee Roth Facebook account and commenting on the David Lee Roth posts and duping people.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many spoof accounts coming, especially for any sorts of celebrities and musicians and the like, but it is pretty far-fetched. I mean, all of a sudden, out of the blue, for Dave to just start responding, if that was even the case, as opposed, I mean, there's not even any text with the post with the artwork, for goodness sakes, it's just posted.
Okay, so yes, that is common logic, but the person who had been on our show told me that Dave is actually a techie. I
believe that.
He had a souped up Mac before any of us did. That's what I was told. So therefore, it's not far-fetched to say he is online. He is reading his stuff. But the person just went through the lengths to have a duplicate-looking account. Right.
That's what I'm saying. I have no doubt that he looks at this stuff, that he's not a complete Luddite, as the curveball he'll often throw. The guy probably knows his way around a Mac real good, probably does a lot of home recording. God knows, I bet you a lot of those remixes that usually, that whole bit, those originate. I bet you he's making those right at home in GarageBand or whatever it might be. So I have no doubt he's really good at this, but I completely doubt on some random Tuesday, he's going to start posting, or commenting on posts. But good on you for chasing it down.
Yeah, that was a big bummer. That was a big bummer. I had a little bit of hope that he was alive and well on social media and just doing the kind of thing where when you least expect him, there he is. But that excitement started around 2 p.m. and it was killed by like 8 p.m. the same day.
I'm kind of surprised, though, when you think about it a little bit more, okay? Because he did have a blog going for a while with some incredibly lengthy blog posts that I think are still up at davidleeroth.com.
Yeah.
And he's so prolific, right? I mean, and the guy is a brilliant and talented wordsmith. So I'm a little surprised that he hasn't used, forget Twitter, that he hasn't used, let's say, Facebook or at least the website more to tell his story in words or whatever's happening, what's going on. I just think he, as far as how much he wants to share and when, is very, I wouldn't even say cyclical. It's on a whim. I think I want to do a podcast now.
What are
He's
the
done
odds
2 of them? Do you know what I mean?
What are the odds that video comic book, The Roth Project, was actually his life story and was his blog?
Right?
Everything that was going on in his life.
I mean, who the hell knows? So, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised that he doesn't offer 2 or 3 paragraphs with a whole bunch of mystery odds and ends in there about why Vegas got canceled. But he'd be a perfect foil for it. He'd be the perfect kind of artist where I wouldn't say expect because no one expects it now, but he would really be the perfect kind of artist where you go, yeah, that makes sense. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, that's a long way of saying that he's the perfect kind of guy, an artist, and I really wish he was more forthcoming and provided more content at social media, at least from his, as far as verbal and written content out there, I mean, Paul Stanley the other day for his birthday posted this really interesting and kind of heartfelt and deep post about, I guess, basically about life, right? On Instagram and Facebook about just where he's gone in his life. Because I think he turned 70 a couple days ago, and happy birthday a day or 2 ago who turned 69 to Robin Zander as well. So it's rare we go a couple episodes here where I'm not genuflecting about either Cheap Trick or Kiss. Having said that, it's just
right.
Their birthdays are right alongside each other practically. But somebody like Paul Stanley, I mean, that's the sort of stuff I think everybody loves when their favorite artists get a little bit more introspective and deep. And Dave, I wouldn't expect to get too introspective, but sometimes he gets a little bit deep. You just don't know how deep that pool is going to go, or if you can find yourself swimming through the very, very increasingly murky waters to exhaust that metaphor just a little bit further.
You mean how deep a rabbit hole goes?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
There you go.
That's the trouble with never. So unfortunately, my scoop was a bust. And within a day of that, Dave bust. Well, Sammy announces a tour. So he's not just playing Vegas, but he's hitting the road with George Thorogood and the Destroyers. And it's kind of weird where you don't know if these are all the dates or he's just super spread out. But you know what? That's a pretty cool lineup.
It is a cool lineup, and it's right on the heels of another, what I thought is a really cool lineup announced too. And that is, in fact, I could see a couple of these bands all touring with Sammy as well. And they both came on top of each other. So I kind of got, for a brief second, they kind of got mixed up in my mind for a minute. But that's Kid Rock with whatever version of a Foreigner tribute band is out there now, I hate to say. And I think Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin Experience, which...
And some dates with Grand Funk Railroad.
Right, with Grand Funk Railroad with former Kiss guitarist Bruce Kulick in it. And, of course, Bonham played with Sammy Hagar. So this is where my mind all went crazy. But as far as, like, good rock shows go, getting some bang for your buck, I could see Sammy intermingling with any of those bills there. And I just think bravo for him for getting out on the road and still doing it at age 103. No, at age 72 or whatever he is. Because we talk about Dave being a mystery guy. Dave never stops producing. We just don't, as far as being active, 99% of the stuff we just don't see or ever we just don't see or hear. Sammy Hagar's got that amazing TV show, was on Access, I think, where there's some great episodes on there. He's got, of course, the whole Cabo Wabo thing. He was doing a lot of music during, quarantine and all that stuff. He's doing covers. He's out there, and I give a whole heartfelt, envious applause for him to still keep kicking it out there.
Can I add Sammy usually does the one thing that makes you cringe. It's all great, and then he steps over the line. And what if I told you that this tour of Sammy Hagar and the Circle with George Thorogood and the Destroyers was, quote, presented by Sammy's Beach Bar Cocktail Company, Santo Tequila, and Beach Bar Rum.
All righty then.
So, in other words, he figured out a way to use marketing money for his company to fund the tour.
Hey, I mean, he's getting paid by his own company, so I'm a marketing guy. I applaud marketing and capitalism, and the guy's a great entrepreneur. Question for you: I have not looked at this, but is Michael Anthony playing in the band?
He is playing in the band with Nick Johnson and Jason Bonham. So Jason Bonham is doing the Hagar tour, and he's doing the Kid Rock tour with the Jason Bonham Led Zeppelin experience.
Got it.
Jason Bonham is keeping pretty damn busy himself.
I love Jason Bonham. I love his drumming. I love it I still have an advanced cassette of the Bonham record from 1989, maybe. I love him in Black Country Communion with Glenn Hughes and Joe Bonamassa. And I just anything that guy's doing, I'm totally curious about, because he is a monster drummer. Yeah,
and he was in Foreigner as well.
That's true.
He was in that really bad VH1 show called Supergroup.
Oh, God. Let me guess. Hold on. For those trivia folks out there, that was with Sebastian Bach, Ted Nugent.
Yeah.
Right?
Evan Seinfeld from Biohazard.
That's right. Yeah.
And Scott Ian, I think.
And a bass player to be named later.
Oh, no. The Evan Seinfeld.
Oh, I forgot. He did play bass. That's right. I'm sorry. My bad.
Yeah. It was funny to watch the dynamic of that show. That they had to come up with storylines that Sebastian Bach basically became the son of Ted Nugent because Ted stepped up after Sebastian lost his dad. I have no idea what was going on.
That's one of those ones where that should never have made it out of the pitch meeting.
No.
It should never made it out of the brainstorming meeting.
But Jason Bonham was on that show, and he actually had to miss a couple of days of filming to do the Foreigner touring back then. So Jason Bonham has been working nonstop for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it is.
Yeah. So, well, let's see. I got to tell you something I found really cool very recently, and that is a David Lee Roth concert I had audio only that I had never found or it came up before on YouTube, and that is a David Lee Roth live radio show from the House of Blues in California, recorded June 28th, 1994. And it was posted to YouTube back on December 20th of last year. And for whatever reason, the algorithms put it in front of me a couple of days ago. And I got to tell you, man, I was blown away. First off, there are 8 songs from Your Filthy Little Mouth.
8.
Okay? 8. I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. No Big Ting is not one of them. However, all my favorite songs, with the exception of Everybody's Got the Monkey, is on there. We're talking She's My Machine. We're talking Big Train, A Little Luck, Hey You Never Know. And man, it is killer. Now, I was not sure. There's really no credits on there at all. There's no video. The only images on there are basically all Van Halen images, which whoever posted that kind of was like, all right, dude, However, it sounds really good. It was for a radio show. Mm-hmm. Dave keeps saying live 97.1. He's got some pretty lengthy raps in there. Some of them are a little bit too long, but they're pretty funny. He gives some good stuff. There's your Van Halen stuff. There's Jump. There's Just Like Paradise. There's Just a Gigolo. There's a really killer version of Beautiful Girls on there with Dave playing harmonica. And it goes to a breakdown where it's just like, holy shit. And there is a screaming version of Your Filthy Little Mouth, the title cut. Land's Edge is on there. I think Nightlife. It is. I'm telling you, man, I was, going to this with a bit of a grain of salt. I'm like, hey, this sounds pretty good. And I start getting the slider over because I'm like, all right, the Van Halen stuff I've heard, 8 songs, I just died. And I'm like, all right, well, who's in this band? And I immediately went, Terry Kilgore.
Yeah.
Former DLR cast guest, Ron Wixow on drums. And I can't remember the bass player. And of course, Brett Tuggle is on there. Jamie Hunting, yes, Brett Tuggle on.
Yeah.
But I did not. It's not Terry Kilgore. It is another former DLR cast guest, Rocket Rashad, and that is the first time I have ever heard his guitar playing with Dave, and he's killing it. He's got a big fat tone. He nails the Van Halen stuff, but adds his own stamp on it. I detected maybe a little bit of difficulty with the Vice stuff, but who wouldn't on Just Like Paradise, or maybe who knows? It was late in the set, sweaty fingers, long set. I don't freaking know, but he sounded really cool. I wouldn't even say trouble. It just didn't. He didn't nail it as perfectly as maybe. Well, Vi would, but overall, man, if you're a Dave fan and you're curious about that era though, find this show, because the only stuff I ever saw from that era was like a Pittsburgh club date with Kilgore on guitar, and this just comes across as a lot more aggressive, the show, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. Find it. It's good. And, 2 thumbs up.
And on a less bright note, Terry Kilgore previously said he would speak to us for the show, and I got a very long, unproofread message from him on Facebook explaining why he's never going to waste his time talking about David Lee Roth ever.
Really?
And yes.
Is this another scoop, or is it just keep it under your hat?
I'll tell you off mic.
Okay, man, that's too bad.
It is. I get where he's coming from. He feels a little burned by some of our fellow Dave maniacs, or whatever we call it, the Roth heads. I think there needs to be a proper name. But I'll tell you who would speak with us, and that's Melissa Reiner.
Yes. So talk about a scoop. Man, we are just killing it with the segues today. Yes. But we want to get to this great interview because this is an amazing Roth exclusive that you found. Melissa Reiner is the violinist in Dave's band on the music for the soundtrack of, drumroll please, the No Holds Barbecue.
Yes.
I mean, talk about a find, man, and talk about a killer interview, considering this is nearly 30 years ago or whatever. She's got a lot of great stories, a lot of great memories, and it's just a fascinating interview. And who knew? I mean, the violinist. I mean, you're talking about ELO covers on there, and well, talk about it. It's killer. We have this in 2 parts. This is part 1.
Yeah, it was a great interview, and I reached out to her. I tracked her down. A listener on our show said, "Oh, by the way, I heard you talking about the No Holds Barbecue. The name of the violinist is this." And I went, "That is her." And I reached out, and she was kind of like, "I've done a lot. Do you really want to talk about Roth?"
You get that question a lot, don't you?
And after she nicely said, "Yeah, I'll speak with you," she goes, "Yeah, so I rewatched the No Holds Barbecue, and I was trying to jog my memory on stuff, and fortunately did that. And we did a little prep where I said, I'm probably going to be asking about X, Y, and Z. And she has to be one of the most intelligent people I've ever interviewed. One of the most accomplished. Roth is really like at the lower echelon.
Oh, she's got dozens. We'll put her email. Jesus, her website will be in the show notes. She's got a slew of credits, and
Optimist Frank Sinatra Sr. and still alive Frank Sinatra Jr. She worked with both of them. There was a cough. We got one.
All right, there we go.
She's the kind of artist that does soundtracks and Broadway, rather London West End, and classical things and pop. And again, David Lee Roth's No Holds Barbecue is not one of her prouder moments, but she did have a lot to say about why it was a great learning experience for her, and that she sort of was in touch with Dave after the fact as well.
And she's in the video.
She is in the video. Like, I did before I spoke with her, I was making note of like, okay, she's on this song. We hear her on this song. We see her, but we don't hear her on this song. She's throughout the video. Rewatching the video on YouTube, unfortunately, created more Rothsteries than answers. Because
we're gonna have to take a very deep dive. Probably be spread over. We could serialize it, an offshoot. 7 episodes deep into the No Holds Barbecue.
Well, we do have an editor from it who may be willing to speak to us in the very near future.
Awesome.
He's mulling it over, but there's 1 or 2 blurred faces in it.
Real, and one of them is hers?
No, not hers.
Oh,
there's a guitarist in a scene that they made like a bus look like it has PV amplifiers that they made to look like, I don't know, spaceships or something like that. So maybe the little people can come out of that. And there's a blurred face guitarist that we see in another thing. And then there's another thing where a guy's playing harmonica and Dave's like, take it, Sam. I'm like, wait, who's Sam?
Who?
Yeah. So we might have a 7 episode No Holds Barred barbecue coming up.
Now refresh my memory again. And just for people out there, No Holds Barbecue was recorded approximately when?
Melissa and I were trying to figure this one out. I got it, I believe, in 2000. So we think 99 and or 2000.
Wow. Assuming it was all kind of done in one shot. I mean, it could have been done over a couple of years, perhaps. Who the hell knows?
Yeah. I mean, some of those recordings like Baker Street still haven't come out.
Yeah.
So the Dave stories,
and this came out after. Oh my God, dude, we're gonna end up. This came out after the DLR band album.
Correct.
I wonder if John 5 is on any of that music.
Great questions.
Has he ever been asked?
I guess I have to interview him again,
or at least shoot him an email.
His email is public, but oh damn it, Steve! So much more work to do.
Dave might never hit a concert stage again, but the mysteries will continue, and we'll cover them right here on the DLR cast.
Oh, we will. Well, sorry to cut this one short, but this is a long part 1 here with part 2 to come very shortly from Melissa Reiner. But hey, thank you for listening. Thank you to Steve for dealing with my crappy schedule and coughing. And
all good, my friend. I'm just excited. I mean, we've got some great interviews coming up. We've had some fantastic ones. I mean, for goodness sakes, name another podcast that has had the woman who trained Dave as an EMT. We got that right here. I mean, seriously, it's the most in-depth look at Dave's time as an EMT you'll read or find or hear anywhere.
#1 David Lee Roth podcast in the world, I tell you.
There we go. Subscribe, hit that like button, whatever. Get after it.
Yeah.
And thanks for downloading and streaming.
Thank you, and thank you. Nothing but what was that?
Until the next time.
You're intriguing because...
Oh, thank you. You're very kind.
I say that because it's not just your credits. It's not just the TED Talk. It's not just that you're a novelist and your blog entries. You're as great a writer as you are a musician, in my humble opinion.
Thank you.
So it's one of those things where this person could do so many different things really well and is responsive with emails and communication. Usually when you get those talents, you then can't keep a calendar or something like that. So,
right.
So before I
Sorry, go ahead.
Talk your ear off about all these weird David Lee Roth things that you experienced, but are positive about, what are you up to at the moment? Because you're very hard to pigeonhole. It's not just like, oh, well, she plays in West End productions.
Right. Yeah, no, I do. I don't know. I feel a little bit like a creative jack of all trades, though, unfortunately, because I've always been interested in writing words, not music. I'm terrible at writing music. Not my thing at all. So I've always loved reading. I've always really been into literature. I've always really been into British literature. So when I moved to London 10 years ago, it was kind of an opportunity to reinvent myself a little bit. I never wanted to quit music. I love music. I still love music. I still want to play, but I wanted to see where writing could take me. And I felt like London is obviously one of the most amazing cities in the world. It's for literature, right? I mean, so many inspiring people have lived and written here and been the subject of novels. And so, yeah, I started writing. I did a degree. I wrote a couple of novels. And I almost got published by Penguin, actually, but long story, it didn't work out, which was disappointing. But I think, like so many things in the arts that I'm sure you know from interviewing lots of people, you never know what project is going to take off, and you never know, you never know what's going to hit. You never know who with money or agency contacts or whatever is going to want to make your project, whether it's a book
timing
or a film.
On top of that, they already had a book about that. Therefore, we're not going to put out your book, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So then I had a child about 5.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was after I'd written my second novel. And again, I'd kind of gotten close and a lot of interest from agents, but just nobody had taken me on. And I thought, you know what, I can't write another novel right now. I don't have the bandwidth mentally after having a kid. So, but I've always loved movies and I play on so many film scores. And I kind of had one of those like epiphanies, where you sort of look at your life. And I thought, some of my favorite jobs that I've ever had have been on movie scores or doing things like the film with Dave, like being with amazing people, actors, musicians, performers, being with these great creative minds and making something that it's not about me, it's about something bigger than me. Mm-hmm. So I wrote a short film and I found some producers and we made the film. And so it's in festivals. We're in a festival, I think in Vienna, Austria, and we just got into the Venice Shorts Festival in LA. And some festivals here in England, Brighton Rocks. And it's really exciting. And I actually feel like filmmaking ticks all the boxes for me emotionally and creatively, because music is amazing. I mean, it's a kinetic art form. So it's performing and it's in the moment. Mm-hmm. And whether you're in the studio or on stage, you're really, you're working with people and it's very collaborative. But it's not creative for me in the same way. And writing obviously is intensely creative, but it's just me and I'm just there by myself. And while I can do it, I'm used to practicing my violin. So sitting in a room writing for 8 hours a day is not a big deal, but it's also, I miss the collaboration that you have as a musician. So when I made my film, it felt like, wow, I got to gather all these incredible people who all have their different talents, between the actors and the costumers and the producers. And I brought everyone together and everyone gave what they could to the project. And I was kind of overseeing it. Like, I didn't think of myself as a director, more like a mad scientist, Yeah. And I really wanted it to be a really truly democratic collaborative effort, because we've all heard the horror stories about being on set or being in the studio or whatever with just like horrendously difficult auteurs. And I mean, obviously I'm not an auteur because I'm just sort of beginning as a filmmaker, but even if I was in the middle of my career, I think I've read about famous people saying, let's have a no assholes on set policy. And I think, that's great. I think that's great. And I've worked with so many musicians to that kind of have that aesthetic. I feel like actually Dave was someone that had that aesthetic. He didn't like say it out loud, but he definitely didn't suffer fools. He's one of those kinds of people, like you have to be on your game. If you're on your game, I found him to be incredibly respectful and enthusiastic. People that faltered, he could lose his temper a bit, but as long as you're on top of your game, it didn't matter.
Okay. So that period of your career, and this is going to sound like such a sexist question, but I'm prefacing that to show that I know what I'm talking about while I say this. So the era around when you did the No Holds Barbecue thing, the major labels were still like, well, this one thing was successful, we're going to sign a bunch of things like that. So in that era, there was a lot of singer-songwriter that straddled between rock and classical, but was a violin player that was up front. There was Tracy Bonham, Lily Hayden, Lisa Germano. Was there ever almost a Melissa album of you out front as that? Is she a rock person? Is she a classical person? Did that almost happen?
No, actually. And you know what? It's funny, as I've aged and I got away from Hollywood and I continued my career in London, which is a very different vibe, and I began also writing and now filmmaking, I realized something huge about myself. I am not a natural performer. And I actually vastly prefer being behind the camera or being in the studio to create something where we can work on it. But performing is it's only something I did because I was pretty good at the violin and I was a good musician and I loved working with amazing people. but I'm not a natural performer. And it's funny rewatching this video, which I hadn't ever really properly seen since I saw it on VHS. I think I'd seen parts of it on the VHS. I can't remember. I mean, it's been a long time. I think it was made 20 years ago. And I was looking at myself and I was like, wow, I wonder if this gig would have been different for me, or for just a different person who was much more like me, look at me. Like, it's just never been my thing to be like, I'm in the spotlight playing sexy, you can't even do it. Like I look like an idiot. Well, that was first of all, you're right. That was Dave's job. Although since I was the only girl in the band, I probably could have gotten away with that. But it's funny because I went on much later in 2008. I toured with the Jonas Brothers, and which was a great gig. They were really lovely guys, treated us very well, and I was actually in charge of hiring the rest of the strings for them. Obviously, they had to approve, but it was wonderful because they wanted a double string quartet, so 8 female string players, so 4 violins, 2 violas, and 2 cellos, and I got to steer my amazing friends that I wanted to work with, that I also wanted to be on tour with for like 4 months. Because that's a big distinction.
I'm cutting you off there. The good hang principle. You're like, I don't care if you're the best player ever, but are you good and a good hang? Okay, you got the gig.
100%. No. I mean, 1,000%. People can't even underestimate how important that is. And major touring musicians know this. I mean, there are a lot of rock band guys that might say, oh, well, I really like that drummer in the studio, but I wouldn't bring him on the road because problematic in many ways. Or maybe just not fun. So, but anyway, the point is, so the Jonas Brothers, like, we had to do a lot of kind of like rocking out on stage. That was the gig. And I felt very awkward. Like, I love to play, and I managed to have fun because I was with a lot of girls that I felt comfortable with. And everybody on stage was great. Like, the Jonas Brothers are amazing. Their whole backup band were wonderful guys, like really fun. But I feel awkward. And it's weird because, I mean, how did I get into performing if I felt so awkward? I don't know. I mean, I think I just kind of fell into it. I felt a little bit like sort of Alice in Wonderland. Like, I got to LA and I fell down this rabbit hole because I can play the violin, and I like playing the violin, and I'm friendly, and I'm pretty, I think, easygoing. And I'm quite confident when I speak to people, but I'm not that confident on stage. And I sometimes wonder if I would have had a different career, maybe doing some kind of a Tracy Bonham kind of thing, if that's what I had wanted. But I never wanted that. I never wanted to be front and center.
Well,
if that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I briefly managed Tracy, and I love Tracy. She's wonderful, and she reinvented herself many times over. So kudos to Tracy. But this is not the Tracy Bonham podcast. This is you. This is Melissa time. And in anticipation of this, I actually rewatched the whole No Holds Barbecue video, which was not the easiest, and took notes. And I didn't remember how much you were in that video. Now, I'm not certain that it's you in every single part of it, that I thought it could be you. And by that, I mean, there's a couple of scenes where there's people just dancing in the studio, and you can pick the drummer Ray out. You're like, okay, there's Ray, so there's musicians right there.
Ray,
Is that Melissa dancing? Is she dancing in the studio? Is she dancing in the hallway? Was that actually you, besides the playing dancing in some of the scenes too?
Yes. And again, I was like, oh God, I'm not being hired for this. I don't look like a bunny, but it's fine. Like, I had a great time. It was a really positive atmosphere on the set, and Dave wanted everyone to participate. And some of those, like the hallway scene with like the super retro, like black and white floor and everything, that's actually his house.
Yes.
It's
Mojo
pretty amazing.
Dojo.
Yeah, I mean, right, the Mojo Dojo, but so he wanted everybody. He wanted, like, I think he got a lot of people on set. Like, when I look back at it, I remembered, oh yeah, he roped a couple of the makeup people to just be in that scene for a bit because he wanted it to really fill out and look like a party. And it was a party. I mean, it was a really kind of celebratory atmosphere on set. I think people were really having a good time, and no one knew what it was supposed to be or what it was all about. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure Dave knew exactly what, except it was supposed to maybe represent a day in the life of David Lee Roth, a maybe slightly fantastical version of a day in the life.
So being chased by Playboy Playmate triplets with fake guns underwater is a day in the life. Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, in his head, perhaps. I don't know.
So we see you playing, and there's so much visual stimuli that you lose yourself and you stop thinking about what's going on. But I hear a cover of ELO where violin is front and center and all that, and that's not a live performance. So that tells me that you also recorded stuff in the studio besides what we see that's live on there.
Yeah, it's actually, it's great that you sent me some questions about, were we in the studio, blah, 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 ahead of time, because I had completely forgotten. Once you said that, it triggered this memory of being in a studio with Dave and recording the ELO, specifically because I think I felt the most comfortable about doing that song, because all I had to do was transcribe. There was a very simple, well, not simple, because it was actually kind of fiddly, but a very specific violin part in the original ELO recording. Mm-hmm. And all I had to do was transcribe it and play it perfectly and play over myself 7 times. But I can do that. I'm a trained classical musician. I'm used to being in the studio. Mm-hmm. What I'm not used to is improvisation. And when I first, I can tell you in a minute, but to go back to the ELO, yes, absolutely. There's an ELO cover. And that was really fun for me because, again, I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. There's a violin part and I can play it. A lot of the other stuff, it was more just come up with this part, just improv on the fly. And that's not what I was trained to do. Whereas all the other guys were absolute experts at it. That's what they were doing. They were rock, jazz, country, all kinds of, I think they all had really pretty different backgrounds, but it was basically all, can we make up something on the fly because we're amazing improvisers? Yes, we can. That's not me. And it's actually incredible that Dave didn't fire me on the first day. And I can tell you kind of a funny story about that if you want to hear that.
Yeah, please. I'm very curious about that. That I was actually going to lead towards that because some of the songs you go, that is a song or that is a standard. There was a song called When It's Love Time that I didn't know that I'm assuming is a standard. And then there's another 1 or 2 where I'm listening like, it sounds like this is a 1-4-5 kind of structure. And you can really hear that Toshi is strumming away. And then you think, so Melissa has to figure out what it is that she's playing there. I could tell that there was improv going on. It did sound natural, but please tell me the story of how you almost got fired.
Well, yeah. Well, it's good it sounded natural because I never felt natural. I still don't feel natural. I mean, it led to me doing a lot more improv for other things. I don't know if that specifically did, but I obviously felt more comfortable, but it's still not something that I'm strong at. I'm much better at, like, you give me a piece of music, I will sight read it. It doesn't matter what it is, I will do it. And I will do it to a pretty decent level, But so basically the reason I think, just the very first day. So I got called to do the gig, and I can't remember how much notice I got, but it was a friend of mine who was also a violinist he did more kind of like studio music, more, he played more with like composers, like for film scores and TV. He probably did less of the rock band stuff. But he, for some reason, I don't know, someone found him and asked him to recommend someone. So he recommended me, which was extremely kind. And I think I remember asking him, like, is there going to be any music? Like, what do I do? And I think he said, well, I don't know, just go there and wing it. And I don't remember that they sent me anything advanced. They may have sent me some tracks to listen to, but they might not. I feel like I just showed up. And I also think, but again, like, this is a very hazy memory, I may have been hired as kind of a last minute addition, because I know when I arrived, the band had already rehearsed at least one day without me. So I don't know if that's because they just want to lay down the tracks without the violin, or if it's because I was kind of a last minute hire. I don't honestly remember. But what I do remember is that I showed up to the gig and I get there and I'm like, so is there any music? Give me the sheet music. And the music director, Bart, I don't remember his last name. I just remember his name.
Yeah, he passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, I had no idea.
But I had no idea that he was the music director. So you just provided some insight right there. Thank you.
Well, I think he was. God, now I don't quote me on it. Maybe you should ask one of the other guys, but to my knowledge, he was the music director. I mean, I felt like he was the one that I had to kind of turn to when I needed like advice, like, what am I supposed to do here? Because he was like the lead guitarist, right? Or was he the rhythm guitarist? Lead.
The rhythm guitarist was Toshi Hikeda, and then Bart was the lead. Yes.
Right. Okay. So I think he was maybe he was the unofficial music director. Obviously, Dave was the music director. I mean, no question about that. But I feel like when I needed questions answered musically, I had to turn to Bart. But I remember, so I was like, so is there any music? And Bart was like, no, we don't need music. And I mean, I think some of those guys maybe didn't even really use music. It just wasn't something they did. And I said, well, do you have a chart? Knowing the tiny bit that I did about like sort of jazz and non-classical stuff. And he said, I've got a Bart chart.
Bart chart.
And I'll never forget. I was like, that was the moment I was like, oh, I'm in over my head. What am I going to do? Because I'm not a great improviser. So he hands me this chart and it's like scribbled out, like, C7 diminished and, all these chords. And I barely got through music theory in my conservatory. I studied classical violin for 4 years at the Peabody Conservatory. I really know what I'm doing with classical music. And I can play anything sort of violinistic, but I don't know much about theory. I barely made it through. I missed half my theory classes because I was, doing something more fun probably. So yeah, I was a little, it's just showing me the chords, I can intellectually understand what that means, but I can't look at a certain chord and immediately know what all the notes are in it. And here's an interesting thing about me musically, is that I am able to actually sing harmonies much better than I am to figure it out with the violin. There's some kind of weird disconnect with my brain because I studied the violin so seriously and I never studied singing. So it's like I can be free and I can just find the note and I'm not thinking about what is the note. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm able to, yeah.
Some people who, this is not a direct parallel, but people who don't play an instrument can hear music in their head. Some people who can't sing can do harmonies. So there's no linear way to how people learn theory or harmony.
Yes. I guess that's a good way of doing it. But for some reason, I feel much more free. I could harmonize to anything because I'm just, because I am a good musician, but in terms of like harmonizing with the violin, I can do it obviously. And I've gotten much better at it since that first day with David Lee Roth. But that was probably my first gig I think I'd ever been asked to improvise. And my God. So anyway, the reason he did not fire me is so I get there to the rehearsal and I'm looking at the Bart chart and I'm thinking, oh, I'm fucked basically. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Like, I'm just going to have to like play under and just be really nice and smiley and really, really receptive and kind. And, which I am, I'm not going to be a diva because it's not about me, but I thought, I'm going to have to really play this like delicately. Right. But the rehearsal is just about to start. And then Dave gets a call on his phone from his security guard at the front gate. And the guy says, oh, the keyboards player's here. But it was past time for the rehearsal to start. And Dave was like, let him come in here and get his stuff. He's fired. He's done. I don't take lateness. And I remember thinking, oh God, harsh. On the other hand, fair enough, right? He's a professional. You cannot be late to professional gigs. Like we're all professional musicians. This is Dave's time. He paid everyone very well. Can't remember what I was being paid, but I think he was like sort of paying weekly or daily. I can't remember, but it was a very, very good rate. And, like, just don't be late. Like it's LA, yes. And the guy comes in, he's all sweating and sheepish and like kind of pleading for his job. And Dave's like, I'm sorry. No, he wouldn't even really let the guy speak, but he was like, sorry, I'm not changing my mind. This is not professional. You can, good luck. Like I let this be a lesson to you for future gigs. I don't remember the words he used, but he wasn't mean, but it was definitely harsh. You know what I mean? He was just like, he was a truth teller. He was like, this isn't cool. This isn't going to fly. And I'm not going to put up with this.
He's also setting an example for the rest of the sessions of you guys are on Dave time.
Yes.
Be here. Yeah.
Exactly. And fair enough. I have no problem with that, but it also, I think honestly, that keyboard player may have been the reason that I wasn't fired. I mean, it was more, I think also to give me a little credit. So at the end of the rehearsal, like I definitely kind of played out alone, trying to play under. And a couple of times Dave was like, let's hear the violin on that. I was like, okay. And I would just kind of play something. And I'm sure some of it was better than I remember. I'm sure some of it was just as bad as I remember. So it was probably a mixed bag. So at the end of the rehearsal, Dave says to me, look, I can tell that this isn't what you're used to doing. And, you could do better. This could be better, but that I can tell that you're a really great musician. You have a beautiful sound as a violinist and let's just get you prepared. Let's just get you, let's get you fired up and ready to play this gig. Basically, he's like, talk to Bart, whatever you need to get going for this, we'll get it to you. You need charts, you need music, we'll get it for you. So I think that it was partly a combination that he had maybe already fired one person that day. He didn't want to do it. Also, I was really young. I was in my, I think, mid 20s, maybe early 20s at the time. And I was the only girl and I was the youngest person. And I think he was being nice. He decided to rather than just throw me out and find a new violinist, which also maybe he thought, oh, how difficult, to find a new keyboard player, not so difficult. To find a violinist that kind of looks the part as well, that's a little bit more difficult. But I think the keyboard player kind of saved me. David already fired one person. And ultimately, I think he recognized my musicianship. I mean, Dave is a really great musician himself. And I think he could just tell, I didn't know what I was doing, but that I could learn.
There is so much to process right there. But one thing I can't figure out from watching this whole thing is everything that Dave does is very deliberate. But I had like a questionable conversation with somebody who trained him as an EMT.
Oh, right.
And her name's Linda. She was his EMT teacher. And she was talking about how hard he worked, how he always did his homework, how he always wanted to do everything the best. But the David Lee Roth on-screen persona is kind of like a slacker. It's kind of like, I'm one of you. I screw up all the time. And then he does the most impressive thing you've ever seen.
Yes.
So throughout this video, he keeps telling you, this is Diamond David Lee Roth, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but neither do you. Like, he keeps doing that kind of a thing. And you go, was this a one-take thing and he leaves in the mistakes? Or does he want the mistakes to be seen? So I couldn't tell if the band did everything 10 times or it's just like, did we get it? Okay, done. Next.
It's a really good question. I mean, I want to say one thing about Dave is I think he's extraordinarily intelligent. I mean, he starts speaking some Spanish. I mean, obviously, that, so I'm not telling you something you don't know, but I mean, not everybody who reaches the level as a musician like him is as smart as Dave. Like, doesn't he speak Japanese at some point? And he definitely speaks some Spanish in the video, like
Spanish, Portuguese.
Right.
He shows he can play guitar. He shows he can play steel drum. Yeah. There's a couple
the
of
ninja,
talent show elements. I always thought, and you could tell me if I'm totally off base with this, I thought he hires the best teacher in the world to teach him how to do 7 minutes of something that looks impressive. And if you went, okay, now play an A minor 7 on the guitar, he might go, oh, they didn't show me that one. It's just like he learns the 7 minutes to impress you, and then he takes the next talent, almost like bar tricks.
Right. I don't know. I mean, he has a pretty good ear. I can tell you from being in the studio with him when we did that ELO. Like, I specifically remember the ELO, maybe because it was just like me, Dave, and I think we would have recorded the violin part. Like, nobody else would have needed to be there just for the violin. So that's why I remember, because it's me and Dave, and he has an amazing ear. So no, I think he's a pretty good musician. I was pretty impressed. I think you're right. I think the whole shtick of like, oh, I'm just like you, I think that's a bit of a persona. And in terms of being an EMT, obviously I can't speak to that because I wasn't there, but I feel like he's the kind of guy that does things really well when he puts his mind to it. And whether it's 7 minutes of tricks or whether it's like, 70 minutes, like, I think he's pretty good at a few things. And so I think when he trained to be an EMT, he probably wanted to master that. He wanted, and also maybe there was an element of proving himself. Like, he's been a rock star his whole life. Now he can do something with the scientific basis, perhaps,
Right. That makes sense. So do you remember if things were like generally one take or multiple takes?
It's a very good question. I feel like there were multiple takes, but I don't remember it being onerous. So I think it was more like, I think the camera was just rolling and they would put us in, like, for example, there's that one scene where like all of us are in the hot tub.
Yes.
The whole band is like in that random, like, giant hot tub thing. I think we're just like, we're all there and we're playing or we're pretending to play, because obviously some of it was recorded with sound and a lot of it was just like, it was just the studio, So I think it was just camera rolling, to be honest with you. I don't know how many really takes there were. I'm sure some of the more elaborate setups, there must have been multiple takes, like the stuff in the swimming pool that obviously we were not involved in. But I feel like for us, most of our stuff, we were just set up and it was just, lots of different angles and rolling and just like having a good time. And then the editor would go through and pick out like, what shots look amazing. I know from, working on editing my own film, I didn't edit it myself. I had an editor, but you just find the gold. And sometimes the gold is not what you planned it to be. It's like, oh my God, that shot is incredible. How did we get the bunny leaning into Dave with Dave making the crazy face and the short man? I can't remember the right terminology and I don't want to say anything offensive.
We say little person, and I think that's acceptable vernacular. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because it didn't used to be a thing, but obviously, like, I do not want to say anything.
There's not a lot of political correctness in this video anyway.
No, oh my God. But it's really interesting because when I look back on it, I thought, I wasn't bothered by any of this at the time. And maybe I don't sound like a feminist because I am definitely a feminist, but I don't remember. I mean, looking back even, I feel like it was the era. And I think the reason it didn't feel problematic to me at the time was because it felt actually very respectful and fun. It felt like there was a lot of kind of just gratuitous silliness and a lot of joy. Mm-hmm. And yes, it's definitely a really sexist take for a lot of the women. However, as I said, it was a different era. And I think that it felt fun. Now, I don't know, because I wasn't hired as a commodity in the same way that the other women were hired. They were hired for their bodies, for their looks, for their appearance. So that was their commodity. And some of them had more of a profile too, like as in the bunny world, you know. But I was hired to be a musician, and I think Dave probably wanted a female violinist, because a lot of people like the idea of a female violinist. It feels more sexy, you know, in the context of a rock band, and that's fine. I'm happy to go with that. But if you kind of look at the clothes they put me in versus what they put the bunnies in, I was definitely in still sexy stuff, but it was not sexualized. It was not anything remotely slutty. It was more like kind of tough, like streetwear, you know, like tank tops and like cargo pants, but like crop tops. You know, so like still sexy, but more like early No Doubt. Like I remember actually seeing No Doubt in Paris in 1997. And Gwen Stefani was very much like kind of tough street style. Like she was super beautiful and sexy, but she was wearing like crop tops and cargo pants and like big boots, you know, like she wasn't wearing like little tiny dresses. And obviously her style evolved too, but and maybe it was also just a function of like, what it was at 2001, I think, when we shot it. So, obviously costume designers are good. Was it 2001?
There's mystery around that as well. I know it had to have been between 2000 and 2002. I'm thinking that it was 2000 because I remember coming home as a high school senior and the UPS driver getting off the truck and going here. And it was 2 copies of the VHS. So I was in high school when it happened. So I'm pretty sure it was 2000. So
okay. That sounds about right, actually, in terms of how old I was and how old I looked in the video, and in terms of what else I had done. Like at that point, I definitely had worked with some other big stars, but it was all in a very different context. It was like being one of a string section to play with like Brian McKnight or like In Sync, for example, you know, that kind of thing. There was a real kind of early aughts, like end of the 20th century, early aughts, like boy band revolution. And they all wanted like cute female string players with them. But I was always part of a section. And it was just a completely different vibe. So when I went on set, to start working with Dave for the first rehearsal, the one that I could have gotten fired from, I was pretty confident going in because I'd already done some other work with pretty big artists, but I just had no idea what I was getting into with no music, with Bart charts.
Bart charts. Well, being super mindful of your time.
Don't worry. It's fine. Yeah. If you have more questions, I could actually have a couple more Dave stories if you want to hear them.
I absolutely do. But the thing that I was going to ask was if you had worked with anybody from that shoot again, because it seems like inevitably you would have run into Ray, the drummer, on a session gig. He was always working everything, and he's now been in Korn, I think, for 15 years.
Yeah. We're still Facebook friends, actually. Well, you know, all of those guys, it all happened before social media and Facebook and all that was really around. So I stayed in touch with Ray because probably he was the other person that was closest to my age out of all the guys in the band. And he was they were all really nice. Honestly, everybody on the gig was so nice, so respectful, including Dave himself. It was really made me feel very welcome because they were obviously a band. Like they'd all been working together for a while. And I was just like coming in. I was the only girl. I was a violinist. Like I was the odd man out in every way. And everybody really made me feel welcome.
To cut you off there, there's also a harmonica player in a couple songs who I didn't figure out who he was.
Yes, I forgot.
So,
I think
so you weren't the only oddity outside person. And then there's a person whose face is blurred in 2 or 3 scenes who I couldn't figure out who that was.
Me too. I was like, who did they blur out? Because is it Bart or no? He was definitely in the video, right?
I don't know if that was Terry Kilgore. Do you know if Terry was around the set by any chance?
What does he play?
He's a guitarist who grew up with Dave, who was in and out of Dave's band like 3 or 4 times.
Interesting. I don't remember. If you showed me a picture of him, I might remember him, but I only remember like Toshi and James and Ray and Bart. Like just because I think I just spent the most time with them. Like the harmonica player had totally forgotten about him until I saw him in the video. And then I was like, he
calls him Sam at one point, but I don't know if it's like Frank Sinatra, who your credits include Frank Jr. and then posthumously you worked with Frank Sr.
Yeah, posthumous. Yeah, I'm not that old, thank God.
But there's stories of like Frank Sinatra Sr. like towards the later years, like they didn't always get him the names of the musicians on stage. So it's like Cookie McRoberts, like that kind of thing. I didn't know if Dave like he just calls everyone Sam or the harmonica player was Sam.
You know what? It could be that Dave was having fun. So no, Dave knew everyone's name. I felt like he definitely Dave was really on the ball. I have to say, like, I was really impressed by him. I mean, for all his kind of loosey-goosey stuff in the video, I mean, I think he really knew what he wanted. And I mean, I think the loosey-goosey was what he wanted, but he knew what was going on. Like he was very much in control. I mean, I think he essentially directed it. Like it's his vision.
Yes. It's the opposite of Jeff Lynne and I love Jeff Lynne and ELO, but he goes, we have great musicians on stage. I'm going to have the music director tell you who they all are. It's the opposite of that. Dave knew what was going on.
No, absolutely. He did. So I cannot remember the harmonica player, but I feel like if Dave called him Sam, it was just like to have fun, just the way he's like pretending to paint a Picasso when one of the girls is like naked, I mean, wherever it comes from in his brain is a pretty special rabbit hole. And I definitely felt like I fell down into the rabbit hole by joining the whole video. I wanted to tell you, actually, this is kind of skipping ahead, but this is a really good Dave story of long after the fact. Oh, so you asked if I work with anybody again. I feel like I ran into the bass player James at some point on the set of some music, like maybe another some kind of like a movie or a TV show or maybe even a video, but something where an orchestra was needed. I feel like he was there and we kind of like, oh, hey, hi. But like, that was it. And I was in Mr. and Mrs. Smith on set and he might've been one of the bass players for that. I really don't remember. I'm sorry. I do vaguely remember running into him maybe once, but I couldn't tell you what project it was. But Ray and I kept in touch because he was just super nice. And he was like, hey, I play in this. He was so friendly. Like it's also funny looking back. I'm sorry, I'm digressing a little bit.
Don't be sorry. You're so generous with your time and the information you're giving me. Thank you.
No, I'm happy to help. Like, it's really actually fun to revisit this because I feel like in many ways, this gig actually got me started just mentally. It didn't actually lead to anything else really for me, but it kind of got me on a path of just thinking of myself in a different way, but although it did lead to some other stuff, which I'll get to in a minute, but I was going to say, looking back on the whole video and then thinking back on the whole, like the Me Too era, I feel very lucky as a female musician in a lot of situations that I was treated very well. It's almost weird that I look back and I think, wow, all these stars were nice to me and all these people behind the scenes were nice to me. And then, because you hear horror stories about people, sometimes even people that I have worked with and I'm hearing something after the fact. Right. But I didn't see anything like that with Dave and I never experienced anything. And I honestly felt like all the guys in the band were the opposite of sleazy. They were just really welcoming. And like afterwards, Ray was just like, hey, I play in this random band. You should bring your friends to come see sometime. And it was Metal Shop.
Oh, yes, which became Steel Panther ultimately.
Yes, which became Steel Panther. But so it was really fun. Like, it was so kind of Ray. He would like he'd be like, hey, I'm doing this show on whatever night at the Viper Room. And I'd be like, great, I'd love to come down. Like, why not? LA, I felt like LA was a really magical place to be a young musician because the more people you met, you would just end up going to parties and you'd go to shows and you'd go to backstage and it felt like something crazy could always happen around the next corner. You could often just like end up in some random mansion, God knows who or why or where. But it was a fun thing to do. So of course, so Ray's like, hey, I played with Metal Shop. And so some of my girlfriends and I would often just go and just support him and like hang out a bit. And he's a good guy. And I was really happy for him when he got Korn. I mean, it's a really great gig. And I think he played with Dave for years, didn't he?